Imagine being born into a world where no one was going to protect you forever. No school, no hospital, no modern medicine, and no one waiting to tell you what to do when danger came. For a Comanche child, survival was not a lesson taught once. It was something learned every day, by watching, by listening, by following, and sometimes, by making mistakes. Because on the Great Plains, knowing how to survive could mean the difference between life and death. A Comanche child did not begin learning survival when they became a warrior. It started much earlier. Children watched the adults around them. They watched how horses were handled, how fires were built, how food was prepared, how camps were organized, and how adults reacted when the weather suddenly changed. The plains could look peaceful one moment and become dangerous the next. A child who paid attention was already learning. The smallest details mattered. The direction of the wind, the tracks left by an animal, the sound of approaching horses, the location of water. These were not simply things to notice. They were information, and information could keep a person alive. To survive on the plains, a child had to learn the land, not from a map, but from experience. Children gradually learned where water could be found. They learned the signs animals left behind. They learned which plants were useful and which ones should be avoided. They learned that the landscape itself was constantly changing. A dry season could change where animals traveled. A harsh winter could make familiar places dangerous. And a sudden storm could turn an ordinary journey into a serious problem. The land was not simply where the Comanche lived. It was something they had to understand. Because the better you understood the plains, the better prepared you were to survive on them. For Comanche children, learning to handle horses was another important part of growing up. The horse was not simply a way to travel. It changed how the Comanche moved across the plains. It could carry supplies. It could help hunters travel farther. And it could help families move when conditions changed. So children learned to respect horses. They watched how experienced riders approached them. They learned how to ride, how to control their movement, and how to stay balanced. For a child growing up in Comanche society, learning to ride was not simply learning a skill. It was learning how to move through the world around them. Food was another lesson. Children watched adults prepare meat. They learned how food was preserved. They learned that a successful hunt could provide much more than one meal. And they gradually learned how important it was not to waste what the land provided. Older children could begin taking part in gathering and other useful work. They learned through observation first, and participation later. This was important because food was never guaranteed. Animals moved. Weather changed. Hunts could fail, and difficult seasons could put pressure on the entire community. So survival meant understanding where food came from, how to prepare it, and how to make it last. Perhaps the most important lesson was that children did not learn survival from one person. They learned from everyone around them. Parents, grandparents, hunters, horsemen, women preparing food and supplies, elders carrying knowledge from earlier generations. Different people knew different things. One person might understand animals. Another might understand plants. Another might know how to work with horses. Another might know how to survive difficult weather. A child growing up in that environment was surrounded by knowledge, and much of it was learned simply by being present, watching, listening, helping, and remembering. Of course, learning survival did not mean children were perfect. They made mistakes. They fell from horses. They struggled to perform unfamiliar tasks. They misunderstood things. But mistakes could become lessons. An elder could correct a child. A parent could demonstrate the right way. An older brother or sister could show what experience had already taught them. Over time, the things that once seemed difficult became familiar, and the child slowly became more capable. This was how knowledge moved from one generation to the next, not through textbooks, not through classrooms, but through people. A Comanche child was never simply preparing to survive alone. They were becoming part of a community. Every skill they learned could eventually help someone else. Knowing how to find water could help a family. Knowing how to handle a horse could help during a journey. Knowing how to prepare food could help during a difficult season. Knowing how to read the land could help the entire group. That meant survival was not only about becoming strong. It was about becoming useful. A child was learning how their own actions affected the people around them. And slowly, they were becoming one of the people others could depend on. When we imagine survival in the past, we often imagine strength, warriors, weapons, hunting, and endurance. But survival was more than that. For Comanche children, it was a process. They learned by watching the people around them. They learned the land. They learned animals. They learned horses. They learned food. And they learned responsibility. The knowledge of one generation became the foundation for the next. That may have been one of the greatest survival tools of all. Not a weapon. Not a shelter. Not even a horse. Knowledge, passed from one person to another, and from one generation to the next. This is Midnight History, where the past is not just remembered, it is understood.